So where are we? Where are we? All right. So live users. All right. So kind of like I was getting into, basically we just decided to create a new page in our application here. So currently the way it was set up, we basically, because it's MVC, we want to cut it up into those three logical pieces. So when we create a new page, first thing you want to think about is, do any of, will I need new models? M is for model, right? MVC. So in this case, I'm not going to use any new models because I already have a user model and a user controller, and I can CRUD on the user, among other things. So I don't need a new model. View, I'm obviously going to need a new view here for my user. So what I'm choosing to call it is pool at the moment. And then the last part, MVC, controller, I'm going to look inside my controllers right here and make sure that in my pages controller, because that's the controller, I just got to create an entry for pool, and in there I'm going to have an instance variable that basically is going to do a call to the database. So this is active record that's helping us out with this, so we don't actually have to write any like SQL code or anything like that. So user.all looks in the user model and looks for all entries. Just to elaborate a little further, if I go into the Rails console, let me see if I can do it in this environment. Rails C. We can actually like physically go in and look at what like active record is doing at the moment. So if it goes, okay. All right, so yeah, if I go user, it's going to explain. All right, well, I got to connect the database first. So user dot connection. Now we're connected. Now if I ask it what user actually is, basically it'll give me a definition of what the model is. So inside user, I have a primary key, which whenever I create a user is given to me by Rails. Created at, updated at, email string, encrypted. All these fields are being basically given to me by device and the couple that I put in myself. So the couple that I put in myself here are image ID, because I have upload capabilities, and my GitHub name for when you actually tie up to GitHub on the actual application. But if I do a user dot first, basically it'll give me the first entry in here in my users, and user.last. So these are all active record like namespaces that help you so that you don't have to actually write the database query. And if we were to actually write the database query, I believe it's actually this right here. I could be wrong, but that would be kind of the actual equivalent SQL code. So when I do user.all here, I'm basically saying, look inside the database, look at all the users you got, and then give me all of them back. So that's what we're doing here, and we're taking the result of that. So let's say it's like 20 users, we're basically storing that in this instance variable right here. So now the way Rails is set up, you basically have a model which pertains to how a user is created. So I'll show you that real quick. Model, and I go to user. This is essentially where you keep the recipe for how you make a user. So this is what the database is actually going to accept as as the user recipe, so to speak. So of course there's like a couple of things to note here, but you know, if you were just getting into Rails, we don't need to get into all this. But basically, here's where you decide the types of relationship a user can have to other database objects. So in my case, I have a database entity called user skills. So the syntax in Ruby is has many. So a user has many user skills. So, and in the database I have user skills, which I could also show you, but I'd have to connect the database and all that. But basically it's a predefined list of user skills they can add. Then I say I have an entry for the actual skills themselves. So a user has many skills through the user skills. And this is basically a join table on the back end that basically the connection from user to skills is actually facilitated by this third entity, which acts as a joining table between the first entity, users, and the second entity, skills. So has many commitments, has many apps through commitments, and so on and so on. So anyways, back to what I was trying to do. So we have MVC, right? I showed you the model. I showed you the controller. So just to refresh, the controller is this guy right here. Right here. Basically, the controller is predefined this variable. Now, this variable holds all our users. What we're going to actually do with it is we're going to go inside the views layer. And this is what's so dope about Ruby is that basically now we basically have access to that instance variable. And we can use this Ruby code to actually access what it got back from the database. So at this point, I'm pretty much at the point where I'm like, all right, I have 20 users. They're all stored in this variable. We're going to use a each loop in Ruby to basically say for each item, here's what we're going to do. And we could do both logic in here. You know, ideally you'd want to do your logic in the controller, but if you had to, you could do it here. But the other option is we could also just return HTML for each item. So right now I'm to the point where I want to just return some HTML. So let's just do something simple here. So I'm just going to say h1, and this is just to confirm that we're up and running here. So h1, and we'll say user, which is our local variable. And what does the user have? All right, well, a user has an ID, email. So let's go with email because I don't actually have a name field at this moment in time. So if I save this and I go back to my app here, go ahead and reload here. It's actually kind of sluggish. Basically, here's the app we're working with at the moment. And now let's go ahead and go to that pools page. So just a quick overview real quick. Your actual routing in Ruby is handled in a routes file. Go figure. So here's our routes file. Basically, when you use something like resources, for instance, what Rails does is it creates a path automatically for you for CRUD actions. So it's almost as if it knows to create an API for you when you call it a resource. So when you have apps, if I do a rake routes here, you'll see that there's actually a ton of routes that were already made for app just because I used the resources keyword in it. So it's a little bit beside the point, but I'd like to show you. So if I go up to apps, right? So let's see here. So if I go to the apps index page, basically, I'm sorry, if I go to /apps, it basically knows to hit up the apps controller and do the index function. And it's like this create, this new, these are all kind of freebies in Ruby. So that's what allows for like the super quick workflow. But anyways, in our case, because it's pages, we're not creating a new resource from user. We're actually just displaying users. So I decided to just hard code it here. So I say that after the root address, there's something called pages, and down one directory from that, you have the pool file, which you're supposed to display when somebody hits that route. So I could probably find it here. So let's see, pages, where are you? Yeah, so pages pool right here. So basically when someone hits this address here, pages pool, they're basically going to be directed to the pages controller and the pool method. So going to that controller, pages controller, basically it's going to look inside this controller and it's going to look for the pool method. Okay, so inside the pool method, all I'm doing is creating an instance variable. Then from there, the view is going to take care of what to display. So pages, so right now we're just displaying all the users from the database, and we're going to grab one individual entry and show the email for it. So let's go ahead and test that and make sure that's working. Pages /pool. So hopefully for each user that it found in the database, it's gonna go pop, 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 and give us all these emails. So nice. This is exactly what I wanted. All right. So clearly something went wrong here. And that's because we're actually telling it to explicitly display the letters. It's doing exactly what we told it. Yeah, this isn't a bug. So this actually needs to be Ruby code right here. And this is basically our escape characters from HTML. So we're saying, hey, I actually don't want you to interpret this as HTML. The equal sign means actually display it. So you'll notice the logic doesn't actually have equal signs. That's basically, let me make this a little bigger. That's basically because, you know, there's no need to really display logic. Because it's what's being used to make decisions. It doesn't really need to be displayed. So now, potentially, we should have a bunch of user emails show up, and that'll prove that we're kind of hitting up the actual database correctly. So yeah, so here's all my users. Scott@gmail.com, lc@gmail.com, anusan@gmail.com, and so on and so on. Sweet. So now we know that our loop is working. We're able to pull the users. So now I think the next implementation detail is kind of like, what I'm thinking here is for each one, I'd like to basically display some nice HTML. So what we have currently for our applications is something like this. So we have like nice cards that display for each of them. I haven't really uploaded photos for all of them at the moment. Yeah, this one's got to get reworked, this last page here. So this is what we currently have, you know. A nice kind of card layout. So I think I'm going to follow suit and do something similar for the users here. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna create an empty template here, and I'm gonna create it under users because that makes the most sense. So right now I currently only have one page here, so I'm gonna make a template literal here. So these are, you know, these are the same thing as like something like handlebars, where you kind of render partials. This is the same idea. So I'm gonna say what makes the most sense. So this is an individual user. So user.html.erb. The ERB designation is pretty much to say that you're gonna have embedded Ruby inside this code. So, and this is an example of embedded Ruby where you have just HTML being written, but within it, when you want specific values from the database, you're actually writing in Ruby code. Very similar to like React or something, where you designate that you want this to be interpreted by JavaScript by having like two curly braces, a set of curly braces, and then in the middle you have what you want JavaScript to interpret. So same story here. These kind of designate Ruby code's about to pop off. You better read it as Ruby code, and so on and so on. So anyways, what do I want each card to look like? So I'm gonna kind of take a quick look at how these cards were built and kind of base it on something similar. So bring it up here. So these are the classes I'm currently using that create this card. So let's kind of examine some of the individual elements here. So pop-up is the class which causes it to pop up when you hover. So this single app might take some very similar styling from this. Let's just take a quick look here. So, and let's look at single app and see if there's anything specific here. So it's really just seems to be single app. Not much styling to it at all. It just seems to be a div. So let's just try that and see how it displays. Div class equals single app. Boom boom. And let's use our Ruby code here. user.email. And let's just take a quick look at how that styles it and see if there's like a built-in height and all that jazz. So let's go here, pool, pages, pool. Okay, and now we need to basically close out some of this because I'm about to lose my mind. Pages. So in the HTML.erb, I'm going to render this partial for each one. So I'm going to say render, and then I believe, so it's going to be Ruby code, and that's going to be equals. So what are we going to render here? So I believe it's a relative path. So from pools, I need to go up one folder. And then I believe you don't really need to put html.erb. We'll see in a second. Let's see if this actually renders here. So user.email, pages, pool, render. All right, looks doable. Okay, doesn't like missing template. Okay, so my path is a little bit wonky. Let's try. There's something weird, at least that I see, is like depending on the environment. Oh, you know what? This is users/user. See if I'm crazy or not. Missing template. Yeah, the double dot or the single dot, I always thought it's 2 dots to go up one level, but I don't know. It seems like I find it I find it single dot sometimes in certain environments, and I'm not sure why. Any day now. Okay, here's something. Pages pool name error user. Okay, so the instance variable here is not being passed. So let's see here, users. So how did I do this in the past? So I did something similar with applications. So let's look there. So I have a giant template called apps. When I look at a singular app, okay, so I wrote the actual HTML and CSS inline. All right. I guess for now, I'll just go with that until I can figure out exactly how to render the template and pass in the instance variable to it. So for now, we'll just delete this. Hit them with this, hit them with this, hit them with this. Delete. Right? Yeah. Don't save, I guess. So anyways, I guess I'll write it inline here. So basically, let's go with a div. We'll give it a class of, what was it? Single app, single underscore app. And here we'll go user dot email, and let's take a quick look. All right, so now I have kind of these cards being generated for each user, and I didn't surround this in Ruby code. Derp. So in a good spot here. So and what I want to retrieve at this point is the user image in the database. So let's go with something like so this holds the user.email. So let's put this in H1 here. Let's go with an H3 maybe. All right, and then right below it, let's display the user image. So let's go with, so I believe I need to surround it in an image tag. Let's see exactly how this library works here. Oh, okay, so I need to use this syntax right here. Copy, and I do want a link to, let's see. I do want a link right there and then to the user's profile. So yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So I'm gonna go ahead and just copy this over and kind of swap out at this point. So basically this syntax here is coming from the refile gem. So this isn't your typical Ruby syntax. So what's gonna happen here is what we're gonna say is the path is gonna be to user because remember that represents each individual user in our database. Now as far as the image, I believe it should just be a matter of grabbing the user image, and I think this is gonna be user default if I remember correctly. Let's see here. Default, blah. Let's just, oh, default profile. I think this isn't going to be sized correctly, but let's give it a shot anyways. Dash profile, profile, right? All right. And let's see if it breaks here. All right, cool. So we're able to retrieve our users' images, and our images are actually showing up as a as a link. So we're in a good spot right now. You know, sizing, of course, being a little bit of an issue. My question now is like, how do I want these cards to actually display? So the idea behind this is basically that if you were looking for an application, if you were a developer looking for applications, you would hit this homepage. There would be some differentiation, some categorizations that I'll eventually get into, but you could find an app. And then on the flip side of that, if you're a person with an app idea, you could actually go to the pool link, pages, pool. You could actually go to this link and then like look up developers by kind of the same type of criteria. So I'm thinking like the categories here would be something like experience, languages, specialties, or anything like that. So basically two of the other sides of the same coin or something like that. So, but anyways, let me get my CSS on point. So I'm gonna look at some inspiration here because I nothing's really coming to me. So the way GitHub handles users is kind of like a little photo, a little bio. You know, this might be like a decent starting point. Is I'll have the user photo, username below it, and a little bio, and then from there, you know, we'll figure out eventually what this card should look like. But for now, I guess we'll deal with this. So right now, the way my gem is set up, it stores a photo. Let's see if, I don't believe that this photo is gonna actually stretch, but we'll give it a shot. And I think it's because the AWS bucket that this is tied up to, like as soon as you save a photo, right, it saves multiple versions of that photo so that the app can basically call on that version of the photo whenever it needs it. So I'm not sure if this is going to work when I tell it 200 by 200, if these actual images are going to display that way. Okay, all right. I'm not mad at this. Okay, so maybe it's creating an entry in AWS. I don't know. I can pull up AWS and look later, but all right. So one thing I'm noticing is like I don't think these cards need to be this wide anymore. it definitely makes sense for the apps. You know, you got a lot of content to squeeze in there, but as far as the users, I don't really think it needs to be all that. I could follow the same format as the apps. I'm not really sure what I want to do yet. So I think I'll go with like skinnier cards. So I'll make this probably like, you know, this big, like 75% of what it is right now, and I'll make them look like little tabs or something like that. So let's go ahead and do that. So go backwards real quick. All right, so I got the resizing. That's good. So now I'll work on some CSS here. So I'm gonna skip out on having the name at the top, and I'm gonna switch that over to the bottom because that's where I started. You know, I started at the bottom. Started at the bottom. All right, and next, I think I'm gonna say. So let's nest this a little better. This was weird about this IDE. It's like doesn't really seem to respect indentation, but I guess that's good enough. I can tell what's what. So let me look over really quickly at where the CSS for these cards is, and it's in the main apps file. Oh, not the main one, the actual apps, the application. So we'll make our own for users. So let's go up here, hit them with this, hit them with this. Assets, style sheets. And we have one for apps. So let's create one just for users. It won't be that big, but we'll still create a separate one just to separate our concerns a little bit. Users.scss. Did I already have that? Guess I did. Okay, so this is all things dealing with the user profile page. Cool. So I think first things first, let's grab the CSS from the actual application. So what is it? Single app. Control find single app. All right. So I'm gonna go figure out the media query stuff later, but for now I'm just going to take what I need. So I should probably rename these to something that makes more sense, because an app container, it might actually be both a user container and an app container. So maybe I should just give it more like a more general name, like general container, like the mixin I'm using. But this isn't like a greenfield deployment. I don't really I could go back and undo a bunch of stuff, but I'm just gonna keep pushing forward. Let's see here. So in here, let's just make sure right now our users are currently nested inside an app container. So this should still work. And actually, while I'm here, let me, because I'm gonna rename this to single dash user, because that's the naming convention I'm using. And actually, I'm gonna take the media queries as well, so I don't have to recode those. So let's go down here, and we'll grab all these media queries. So boom, and we'll just delete the stuff that doesn't really apply. So like all this really doesn't apply in this case. So this should take care of the flexing. So it took me quite a while to get everything right when I was creating the app. So hopefully this should take care of the, should do a replace all probably. So anything that says single underscore app, replace with single dash user. All right, cool. So it took me quite a while to get the media queries right, but they are pretty good on the application. So I'm just gonna copy over these media queries. Right now I'm using Flexbox. Right out the gate. Oh, it's the container that actually does the flexing for each item. All right, well, let's try it out and see where we're at. So pages, pool. So rather than single app, this is going to be dash user. Give it a reload. All right, cool. Let me test these media queries real quick. Okay, good. They do work though. So I guess it's, what is it? Is it, yeah, there's some funkiness going on here. I think the different image sizes are definitely, I think when those images crash is when it actually takes over. So once these images are set to like a static size, more or less, these will collapse correctly. But as you can see, they're already kind of collapsing correctly. And basically that's the result of the media query. So I'm saying like flex basis is going to be like 90 when the media query reaches a certain size. So once these images get resized to, it should have something like 2 with some nice padding in between them, which I'll add in a second. But yeah, all right, looking pretty good. Pretty good. Very responsive. So now we got some nice margins between them. Now I guess I'll take care of the actual image issue. So I'm going to say if there's an image inside this container here, this single user, we're basically going to make it a certain size here. So let me just think out how I want to achieve that. So let's see here. So I can always add a class to this. I really don't see a need. I just need to get this proper default image to the right size. So if I do set them to 200, which basically it looks good. I think we could go like a little wider on it. So let's test that out. So oops, not what I wanted. Control C. Let's see here. Oh, interesting. All right, so there's no CSS class resizing this. This is literally the refiled gem saying you requested an image to be 200 to 200. It creates a Amazon entry in AWS, and then after that entry is created, it actually pulls it in to display it. So if I look in my Amazon bucket, when I wrote this code, even though I'm not going to keep it 200, there's probably going to be a 200 by 200 image at this address inside the bucket. Interesting stuff. All right. So I can't actually just resize and play with it, or maybe I still can. Let me go back here. All right. So now if I say this element, let's give it a width and kind of play around with it a bit. So let's say it's 200 pixels. Height. Well, actually, let's give it a set width to make it responsive. Instead of actually doing height and width, I think the rule is you just do width. So, and let's see if any of this even takes. Okay, it does. All right. So, where do we want our image? So, I'm thinking like when it's regularly displayed, there's no need to have this crazy image size. Let's see here. I'm thinking something like that. That way we could fit like 4 in a row, or 5 maybe, if that's the entire width of the card. So let's just call it an even 250. This will probably change in the future anyway. So 250 will be the image width, 250 by 250, and then the card will be flex. Yeah, I gotta figure out exactly how this card width was done, whether I hard coded it or not. Okay, so width was set to be 31%, and this is, part of the media query so that 3 would always fit on the same line. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm going to set it so that at max screen it's about 20%, and then the image width I'll always, I can't actually set the class and say like image width 100 in refile unless there is something in the documentation that says I can pretty much add a class at the end of that statement. So what I'm thinking is, let's get the width to 20% on these cards, and let's see if you can add a class to the image that you get back from refile. And my other alternative, I guess, is pretty much set like a hard width value to it. But if I ever want to change anything in the future, it becomes kind of inflexible, because say I want to change the card size now to like 30 or 40 or whatever. Now I have an image that is constantly given to me at a hard pixel value. So it's not going to be responsive. It's not going to be flexible. It'll still respond to media queries. So I could still always say, like, when the screen gets so small, only display one card, but the actual image itself is not responsive. So what I want to do is I want to add a image width or max width of 100%. That way, no matter what size the card is, it will always take up 100% of the width. And you don't set the height so that it stays in its perspective. So let's change the card. I'm talking way too much. All right. So let's look over here. Let's look in our users.scss and go over here, and we basically, where are we stating 33%? Let's see, min width. Okay, so this is at the maximum width, so we're gonna go with something like 20, and see how we look. Yeah, so the cards will roughly be this width. I think this is fair enough. I expected 5 per row, but the anytime you use padding on the inside in the margin, it basically sets off the calculation. So I have a nice margin between each one, and I kind of want to maintain that as well. So I'm just going to keep it 4 to a page. What I might do is I might increase the container width that they're in, but for now 4 is fine. Let's get this image down to the right size. So I'm going to quickly look at the refile documentation and see if I could find something about adding classes. Refile documentation, adding class. Attach image, fallback nil. I don't see any examples of classes. Add image class. And I might have actually already done this for the actual application, so take a quick look here. Style class. Let me take a quick look. I might have already done it for the application. So let's go into my app, and No, I'm not really seeing any evidence. So within this image tag, there might be an argument that you can pass of a class. So that's really what I'm looking for at the moment. If I can't, I don't think it's gonna be that hard. All right, you know what? I'm not even gonna bother. What I'll do is I'll put it in the SCSS. So I'll say whenever you see a image nested inside the single user, okay, with 100. Okay. Oh, all right. Whenever you see single user and an image nested inside of it, you're gonna make the width of that image 100%. Yep. All right, cool. So hopefully these default images, which aren't the right size, will get resized to 100% of the surrounding div. And yeah, looks good. Looking good right there. Looking good right there. All right, this is progress. If I ever seen progress, this is it. So right now they're acting as links, and they actually go to the user profile. Sweet. They're not pretty right now, but looking pretty good. We gotta get some concatenation going on, or make these smaller. I think I'm just gonna make them smaller. So rather than using an H1 pages controller pool, rather than making them at H3, let's try at H5. All right, whatever. It's fine. So, all right. Let's see here. I'm just gonna put some lorem ipsum in the bio for now, because I don't actually have a description field yet. Lorem ipsum. I don't have a description field quite yet in the user, so I'm gonna hard code one in. But what's gonna happen is in the future we're gonna say right under this we'll probably have a p tag. In the future, what we'll say is oh my god, this ID. All right. We'll probably just say user.bio or something like that, and we'll pull that from the database, and then we'll basically, all this information will be pre-filled. So in the profile area for the user, I'll probably add in a couple of fields. So right now, what the profile section looks like for the user is, if you go to profile, basically your image, the current commitments you have to applications on the platform, your languages, so C++, sweet. In here somewhere, I'm gonna revamp this whole side of things later on, but in here somewhere we'll have like a little bio description, and kind of once you put that in, it'll go to the database. Then I'll be able to say user.description and just pull all this stuff. So, but in any case, let's see how we're looking here. I guarantee you, I'm probably gonna have to truncate this value because it's too much for the actual container. So I'm gonna use something very similar that I used earlier. So yeah, just I suspected this is way too much. So one thing I could experiment, it's probably not a good idea at this point, but I could make the font size even smaller. So working with 1em, which is relative. Let's try something else here. Let's try 14 pixels. Yeah, so we're roughly working with 14 pixels. In any case, I'm gonna have to figure out exactly what needs to be done, but for now, let's truncate it at like, I don't know, like probably 200 characters. We'll say after 200 characters, just just truncate this down. Nobody wants to see all this, so we'll go ahead and do that right now. So I did something similar to this for the application, so let me see exactly. So I use this kind of dot dot dot. Obviously, there's more to it. So if you click on here, it'll generate the image and kind of give it the full description. So we're gonna do something similar for this. We're just gonna say dot dot dot. So let's see here. We go underscore app. Let me just make sure that, yeah, I don't think this is the right file. So again, it's all MVC, so everything's kind of nicely layered out. So what we're looking for right now is a view, a actual display component. So we'll look under the views folder here, and I'm looking for apps. So apps, the naming convention in Rails is usually like plural means all of them, singular means one. So for me, when I want to display all the apps, I basically have it all in the app file. So I got to get to the description part. So Ruby has a built-in function called truncate. So right now, let's see here. The argument that's normally passed in is an item from the database. So I'm wondering if it's going to be able to take a string as its first argument here, and we'll test that out right now anyways. It should, because really when I say app.description, what it returns is a giant string, you know. So if I substitute that kind of that method or that dot notation or whatever you would like to call it, the active record nicety, with the actual return of what it's going to return, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. So let's go for it. Let's do it. Got a message here. Let's do it. Jose Canseco's here. Is now. All right. So anyways, copy. Where are we going? We're going to users. We're going to the pool file. Yep. So here I'm going to say for this p tag, we're going to truncate, and instead of passing the actual database argument, we'll pass in some strings here, and we'll basically say, hey, you know what? For now, we're going to pass you in this giant description, and basically it's saying at 100 characters, we're basically going to do an omission. So let's try it out. So where we at? We're at pages, pool. Looking good. So it's truncating our way long, overblown description. Looking pretty good. 100 should be fine. I think what I want to do next is I really want to make like so I guess the real question, you know, and I felt like I should have done this before I started coding, but you know, you can't look back at the past. What I should really be asking is like, what's going to make a difference to the user, and kind of like what are the features that need to be developed based on the use case. So right now what I'm thinking is, if I take each one of these user profiles and under them I take the languages from their profile. So if you go to a profile, you basically have C, C++, and Angular. I could grab the dev icons for them, or the icons, and kind of display them at the bottom of the user, thing here. So, you know, if this person knows JavaScript and React and Angular and Ruby, I'll display those icons right below their name. And that way, I feel like if you're looking for developers to add to your project, then, and you went to the pool page, which is eventually going to be here, you would come to this page, and your immediate question would be like, all right, well, I'd definitely sort these out depending on some kind of order, maybe like they're the most active or something like that. And then I'd be like, So there'd be that nicety in it. But then if you're coming here looking for developers for your app, like you'd like to message them and say, hey, you know what, here's what I got working, here's what I got going, come check out the app page. Which you'd want to see kind of like what they have experience with. So you'd be like, all right, well, are you a JS person? Are you an Angular person? That being said, there's a lot of similarity between all programming, I think. You know, especially like the MVC paradigm, that's used a lot of places. Every language seems to have classes, even if it's a mockery like JavaScript. Every language has composition. Not every language is statically typed, but you know those things kind of go by the wayside. You know, everything else still exists, like loops and things like that. So really, I'd like to know the languages. So I think what I'll do is I'll pull the user dot skills, and then for each skill I'll have like a conversion for the devicon. So I can actually do that right now because skills is in the database. So let's do that right now. Let's do it for real. We're really gonna do it once I figure out the first step. Let's see here. So I'm gonna grab the card and let's just try to just display them. You know, that'll be an achievement in itself. All right, so here we go. This is the closeout for the single user. Let's see if my shortcuts work. Okay, they do. Yeah, this thing is so weird. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. All right. So right below this, we could start pulling in the devicon. So I have a couple of ways I could do this. I could either hook up a CDN, or I can kind of get the actual style sheet. First things first, though, we got to find some icons that we actually like. So let me see here. I think the devicon ones are cool. I'm not really sure what if these are the ones that I settled on that I really like. So yeah, I think these are the ones. So potentially if someone knows, oh, I know Atom, I'm an Atom professional, I put that on my thing. If somebody knows Angular, for instance, we'd want this icon to populate at the bottom of their profile. So it's pretty straightforward. That's why I like this library. It has both like neutral colors and the actual colors of the things. So yeah, I guess I'll go with this. So link style sheet, href, cdn, devicons. I'm wondering if this is the individual devicon link or the actual devicon library. I guess we'll go ahead and try it. So I'm just going to go with a CDN for now. I think normally I'd download the style sheet. But I remember there was some wonkiness working with the style sheet when I did. So I think I have like the Bootstrap style sheet local and a couple other style sheets local. But, you know, now's not the time for that. We're MVPing. We want to be quick. So let's go ahead and just throw that into. So basically our head of our HTML document is in our layouts file. So if we go to our application file. So you know, if you weren't too familiar with Rails, you would say like, how are you generating kind of like the, you know, I don't see any of the code for this nav, and I don't see any of the code for this footer that you don't see. I don't see any of that code. Basically, what the hell was that? Basically, it's because it's here. So in the application file, this is kind of your default layout. So no matter what page you're on, it's almost like Bootstrap is a templating engine, because you pick this header template. This shows on every single one, and I can put like a footer here, and then in the body, this yield tag is what actually yields what's in my pages, in my views. So if I'm in the apps page, it'll actually replace yield with whatever page we're on and the appropriate HTML file. So cool stuff. So I'm just gonna add it up here. Hopefully this works without too many issues. Let's do it. Let's do it. All right. Copy. So, again, I'm wondering if this is just the style sheet for the one icon, which would be stupid. It probably isn't, but I'm almost like, why would they give me a specific link? Unless all of them have that same link. Let's see, this hash ends in a 3. This ends in a 3. Okay, yeah, it is the same style sheet. Okay, it's not that stupid. All right, so now we basically have to do like a conversion table. So we have to look at user.skills, and depending on what we get back, we have to render the appropriate icon. So I think first things first, we need to kind of take a look at, well, first we need to confirm that these icons actually work. So let's just hard code something in. I am partial to something called Java, or I'm getting partial to something called Java. I'm starting to like it a little bit. So let's go here and let's actually hard code it in and see if it actually shows up, and then we'll know that our style sheet is linked up and working correctly. So let's go here into pool right after. We'll insert this icon here, and then upon reload, it'll pull from the CDN. Yep. So it's pulling from the CDN. You can see in my sources here. Boom, sources, CDN, raw git. That's our devicon pack. So we're pulling in that style sheet, and we have a nice little Java icon. Fortunately, it's pretty damn small, so we could do better than that. So I'll say I already have a class. I'm wondering if it's actually called 7x. I forget, but we'll find out in a second. Okay, it's not called 7x. That basically increases the size of fonts, but we'll create it right now. So we'll say, we'll call this what should we call it? We should call it like bigger, better, faster, bigger. I don't know. So we'll call this bigger icons or something very verbose. Bigger dash icon. You know, someone said that naming variables and naming things is like the hardest part of programming, and it definitely is, because just like classes, it requires you to have like foresight to what that's always going to be, and that name is usually contextual to what's around it, and you have to have like a lot of foresight. So I'm calling this big icon, but come to find out later there's like bigger icons, and this name no longer makes sense. So it's like, it is what it is. You're gonna have to go back and rename it. Code is always a work in progress, never done. So let's see here. So I'm not sure if these scale just like fonts, so we're gonna go ahead and test it in line so that we don't, you know, go back and forth coding on stuff that doesn't matter. So if we go here to this icon, we could basically say something like font size, if it is considered a font, and we'll go 20px. All right, cool. So it seems to work just like a font. Java, I know Java. I'm a Java walkie. All right, so font size 30px. So let's just go with 30 for now. Should be fine. I already know what it's gonna do. I just like seeing it sometimes, so maybe I don't know. Oh, okay, you know what it is. I didn't add this class to the actual icon, so we don't need this anymore. 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 And so the class I'm gonna add to it is big icon, and this should do it. There we go. So cool. Our devicons are actually loaded up. Next is going to be, oh, okay, looking into the actual user skills. So within this this local variable here that we have is user. So now I feel like what I'm gonna do is say hey, So I could either write the code here or write it in the controller. This is a philosophical question when coding, because this is kind of a one-off situation. So, the argument could be that I write it inline inside the view, or you could just say, hey, to future-proof it, you should put it here, even though there might not be a case, but it's always better to put it in the right place, because in the future this code base could grow. But I'm not sure how to do it in the controller. So what I'd get back from user skills. So first I got to confirm what I'm going to get back from user skills. So is it an array? So I actually forgot. So I'm going to have to check it myself. So I'm going to say database. Hey, database, wake up. I'm going to say database, tell me what a user tell me what a user dot first, right? So there's my first user. If I ask you what user dot first dot skills is, will you know what I'm talking about? So I think what's happening is I gotta create a DB connection to all those databases. But actually, no. Here it is. So it seems to be associative collection proxy. This is what user skill is. User skill. User hashtag skill. Okay, so I'm gonna get back this array. All right, this is gonna be a little dicey. All right, so user skill dot skills with an S. So no matter what, this is an array. So let's try bracket 0. And if bracket 0 works, what we're gonna do is, okay. So we're getting back an array. So what we're gonna do next is we're going to basically loop through all the items that are in that array. And then what we're gonna do, I think, and this is probably until I refactor it, but we're gonna say for each dot skill in that array, we're gonna return the value, and I think we'll have a switch statement, and basically we'll tell it to return. Things just got dicey. We could have a switch statement that basically says if C++, return this. That being said, HTML should only live in here, so maybe I can create a new array. So I could loop through it, and I could create a new array with just the array names, and then when I loop in it in the front end, I'll say devicon. Dash simple dash name. So looking at the naming convention here, so I could say the name of the language. So when I go through this array, I could say user.skills, loop through that array, find me the .skill entry in each of those. .skill will have a name, so it'll be like C++. So I could use Ruby code to basically say swap this portion of the li class, of the icon class, with the actual appropriate language. But then that means my database would pretty much have to match this. So let me look at like C++. They might have like a funky naming convention, and I actually have to play with their naming convention correctly. So if I look at let's control find C++. Hey, what's up, man? No love for C? What's going on over here? No, I'm not. Well, C#, C. Oh, see, so it's written C++. So in my database, I have to have an entry that says C++ for the icon, or do I? Um, hmm. Let's see here. So let me try just like mocking up some of the controller. Maybe that'll give me a better idea of like how I should approach this. So if I go to the user's controller, so, or actually the pages controller rather. So I'm gonna go to the controller which controls my logic. Pages, pool. Whoops. Go to my controllers real quick, go to pages, and inside the pool right now I'm pooling all users. That's pretty cool. That's not a bad thing. So I could run a each loop here, and I could store all the return from that each loop inside an array. Yeah, this one might need a little thought. More than I can do live. I might need a bunch of time to figure this one out. But in any case, I guess I'll probably do that on my own time. Well, this is where we left off right now. Let's go ahead and add the navbar link for this new page called the pool. It's going to be the pool of developers that you can pull from. So let's go ahead and go into our navs. So under views, where are we? So if I go into views, layouts, I have my navbar guest and my navbar user. I think it's going to be available in both, so that makes the most sense. So let's just go, and this is just a bootstrap navbar that's been customized. So let's go ahead and find. So here's our drop down, pages index path, pages index. Okay, so this is home, sign up, login. Okay, copy. All right, so let's start with the user, because I'm not sure. I think I made it so that when you're not logged in, you can't actually see everything the app has to offer. So because there's actually like a landing page, and that's supposed to get you to sign up, and then from there you get kind of access to everything. So let's take a look here. So here's my drop down. So right before that I have an image of the user, and right before that I have apps. So this time around I'm going to need another li item, and hopefully I didn't use nth child somewhere, because this is gonna screw everything up. All right, so let's go to. So let's just remind ourselves real quick in our rake routes, this is how you get to the pages pool controller. So I believe this should be pages pool path. So pages pool, holy crap. That's not what I asked you to do, sir. Okay. All right, well, looks like typing is the way to go. Pages pool path, and the link is gonna say pool. And let's just test that we are going to the right place. So we no longer have to type things out. We want to see all the apps available. Here's the apps that's currently on the platform that need developers. Boom, boom, boom. Have this weird last page for some reason. And then you go to the pool and you actually get back all your developers. So what I'm going to work on next time is probably that implementation, or I'm going to work on it probably off screen. Just because I think it's going to require a lot of Googling. I'm decent in Rails, decent enough, but you know, certain little things you just forget how they're done, or you know, maybe you just haven't encountered them. So this is one of those situations. That being said, thanks for joining me on this kind of short coding of one of the MVPs I'm working on. Please subscribe, like, and do all that good stuff. I'll see you guys later.